So here we've done a bit of draping on the half scale dummy, and I just wanted to go through a few little things that I've done or noticed along the way. I think a big thing, and I've seen this on YouTube videos of people who drape things on the dummy. If you're doing a symmetrical thing, you only need to drape half of it because it's going to be the same on the other side anyway, and then this will eventually be put on the fold in your fabric. But what I saw online was somebody who did this, and they had all of this flush so that the center front sat down like right on the dummy. But the thing is, like if it's full scale and you've got you don't have a seam there, it's just going to glide across between the bust points anyway. So like you are getting this little bit, like that's just the ease, the difference between the body and the garment. So don't try and overfit as you go along.
And Mark, what block have you used for that?
Actually, this wasn't a block at all, Libby. This was just, I cut a rectangle that was like as long as the dummy and maybe, like this wide here, and then just played with it. And you can see here at the neck, I've got this bit turned back so that I can match up the shoulders. But you can see here how there's that extra piece of fabric, and that's because I wanted to change the neckline. So rather than cutting a whole new piece and starting again, I just went to the sewing machine and sewed on a bit of calico scrap so that then I could change the neckline without having to redo the piece. So that's something you might find you need to do. Here at the waist, I've just done a big tuck, that goes, the back of the tuck goes towards the center front there, and you can play with it either way. I like mine going towards the center front because I liked this line here and this fullness here, but like you can switch those whatever way, and that's really, that tuck there is what gives us the only fit as well. On the side seam here, I've trimmed it in, and that is to see, and just sort of so made sure, actually that's the thing too, when you're doing the side seam, make sure that you don't pull all of this over this way and then chop it all off, and then you end up pulling the front of the garment over. Just be very gentle, there's a big tuck there, so just make sure that stays in place when you get over to the side seam. And here I've just folded the fabric back to the outside so that I can check, I can see where it goes in regard to the side seam there. And when you're doing, if there's any sort of waist shaping as well, and you're folding fabric back on a curve, if you cut into the fabric, it'll just open up that there as well, because if it's like this, sometimes it won't fold back and it'll distort. So you can sort of clip in along the seam. And then on the back here, I've got the center back on the fold. I've actually turned this back here because there will be a center back opening. There'll be a zip in this because it's quite fitted. It won't go over the head. It's got some waist fitting, so it'll need a zip in the back. So just be aware of that. You can see here where I've played with this shape that I want the armhole, and this armhole is quite neat in regard to the armhole on the dummy. So you can see there, you've got that fold, or not fold, almost like a corner where it goes from the back into the armhole there. So rather than pinning that all in as well, which can get a bit tricky around an armhole, just draw in the armhole shape so that it's ready to transfer onto the paper. And then on the shoulder there, I've just tucked the fabric back and pinned it, and that's so that the shoulder seams line up. And you can see here there's a bit of a difference in the shoulder length. So this one, the back one is wider, the front one's shorter, but you can neaten those things up when you're actually tracing out the fabric. Important thing too with the tucks here, you can see that I've put a line on the fabric, where the fold is and where the placement is as well, and then put these little crossbars to show the beginning and the end, because that's going to be stitched in place to keep it in order there. And then just on the side seam, just see that I've done this so that those folded edges just they tuck up next to each other. But yeah, can't stress how important it is not to overfit on the dummy, because the thing is, if you fit it so that it's skin tight on the dummy, you cut it out in fabric, or you make it, make it full scale, cut it out in fabric and sew it, and it'll be way too tight. It's one of those weird things. It should work, but it doesn't, and so you would need at least sort of like a couple of centimeters ease around the body so that it just it fits when you blow it up to full scale.
And most of our blocks have at least a couple of centimetres ease on the waist, and even more usually through the bust and the hip, don't they?
Well, that darkness block I think has got like 10 centimetres ease around the bust. Yeah, so it is quite a lot.
Yeah, always easier to run in after, once you're making up.
Exactly. Yeah, but if it's too small to begin with,
Yeah,
you're stuck right at the beginning. So I'll just take this off and just show you. So this is the piece, and I've got in the armhole detail there, the shoulder, the centre back, and I've marked. If I pull that out, I've got the marks there for where that waist tuck is there on both sides, and so I can just pop this down.
So you created this earlier.
Yeah, well yes, exactly. This is sort of showing you a bit of the process. And so I've added a seam allowance, which is 1/2 centimetre. Because this is half scale, seam allowances I've used on these pieces are 1/2 centimetre. That way when you go to blow it up later, you're doubling the seam allowance, so you'll end up with a 1 centimetre seam allowance from the original 5mm one. And you can see there I've literally just got you could use a pencil, but like a tracing wheel, and running along the edge, and this around the armhole as well, having that going through. You can see that the holes there where I've done around the armhole, and then the shoulder seam, and this for some reason already has a seam allowance around the neck, so that's already there, and then so we're here at the waist. So I've used my tailor's awl, and I've put marks in these 4 spots, and then when I pull that back you can see those spots there, and then I put little drill holes just inside, which is like 2.5mm, remembering that once it's up to full scale it'll be like 5mm in, 5mm down from where you actually want the tuck stitched. And this is the front one here. So we've got we've traced off the back, we've got the front one, we've traced that off, and before we go to cut this out, again like a half scale sample, we just need to make sure that the side seams are the same length. They don't necessarily have to be the same shape, remember that. So like if I'm just putting that on the stitch line there and moving this around, see I can move that along, and the shape is slightly different but the lengths are the same. So you might come across that when you're doing yours as well.
And you've notched at the waist, haven't you, Mark?
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
yeah. So just to have a bit of a reference point along the way as you're sewing it. And then we talked a bit about that front shoulder being out as well. So you can see here that I just have to make sure that the shoulder lengths are the same. So I've altered the front one, or actually I can't remember. Maybe I cut the back one shallower. It doesn't look very wide, but just made sure. So the neckline has to be like that. Has to be the great, the more exacting bit, and then you can change the shape of the armhole. Of course, if you're putting a sleeve in there, that's a little bit different. But I think if you were doing something quite as simple as this, and you wanted a sleeve, you'd probably start with the dartless block. It's probably not something that you would drape. So once I've got my pieces ready, I can cut out a new sample here. So this is the one with with things sort of like evened up, and my tucks stitched in place at the front. With the tucks too, just have a look and see which way you like them. These ones on this, the tucks go the tucks go inside. I mean, sorry, they face towards the center front, but because they're just stitched along here, you know, you could actually flip them out, you know, and that might be another option as well. So you can play. So you might have started thinking about the tucks in one way, but then when you make up your little half scale sample, I mean, this is nice because it's sort of a bit flatter in the front, with sort of the fullness more towards the side. But see how you go. And you can see here too that like this is the point too where you start playing with the neckline. Like this is a dual neckline, it's called, where it's just sort of high and round. But you know, like you can actually start playing with the shape of the neckline, cutting it away, and you know, reshaping that, and also, you know, playing with the armhole as well. We do get a bit of fullness here, but that's because there's no actual bust dart. I was playing on this one with the idea of a bust dart, but I thought, no, that's fine. Like we'll just give it a go and see what happens with this in full scale, and see whether, you know, we really do need to put our attention on that. You know, the thing is always with dartless things is that it depends on the bust prominence as well. So, you know, the more pronounced the bust shaping is, the more it's going to look like you need a dart to deal with that. And then in the back, I've just got the back open where the zip would go. And again, the same with the tucks, you can play with those at the back. So whether you have them going in to the center back now, or whether you flip it around so they, you know, they go out. And you can see that, you know, like it's not skin tight. You know, there's quite a lot of ease around this. But this is the point where you can start to play with that a little bit as well. You know, and maybe you put in a little bit of waist shaping, but keep the volume around the hem here, and adapt your pattern accordingly.